Greetings. Welcome to a new episode of Art Matters. I'm your host, Wayne Quackenbush, and today we'll be interviewing two Rhode Island artists, and I'd like to introduce our first guest, Jamie Derr, who I've met recently at an opening sponsored by the Portsmouth Arts Guild, and she showed some of her portraiture, and we got into a very interesting conversation about the intersection of art and writing and music. Now, you've had a unique journey, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into your creative life.
Well, when I was a little girl, I was about 7 years. My family has a lot of art running in their blood.
Mm-hmm.
My father owned a bakery, and he didn't want me to bake, I guess, and he had me in the back at the desk, and there was like parchment paper, so I would sit there and pass the time by drawing on parchment paper. And I just found myself inclined to be creative, and I would even go to down the street. There was a dress boutique, and I would bring my pictures. I think I was 7, and I would bring them to her, and she'd put them up on the wall.
Oh, nice.
And besides that, I would also sit there and sing and write songs. I was just very inquisitive, and I would even go to the Rogers Free Library because I grew up in Bristol, Rhode Island, and I would sign myself up to classes by myself, and I would do, like, they'd have workshops, and I would just do stuff like that, and so I realized that I really was an artist, and I basically, in the beginning of my life, I focused more on music. It was more accessible to me because with the art, you know, there's a lot of supplies. I was a little intimidated by, you know, how do you use oils? How do you do all that stuff? And I would just sketch. So with music, I could just sing.
Yes.
So I taught myself, I trained myself, and I basically did it everywhere I could. I had some great vocal coaches. I sang anywhere I could, and I ended up getting some opportunities when I was a teenager to open up for some Grammy Award-winning artists, and I sang locally in many different bands like R&B, rock, jazz. I did some classical. So I found myself when I was younger being drawn to music, and I created an album, and I feel like at that part of my life, music was a great way to express myself and kind of be in my feelings. I was very extroverted at that point in my life. I really liked the showmanship. I really liked being on stage and connecting with people. And then I found that as I've gotten older, I've kind of really liked the introspected part of writing and art.
So you're shifting gears. I mean, you had a career that lasted a number of years.
Yes.
As a singer, a professional singer.
About 20 years.
And then recently you kind of have thrown yourself in not only the visual arts, but also you're exploring poetry.
Yeah, I actually always liked to write when I had any kind of thing going on, you know, but when I was in my 20s, I ended up going to college because I'm a young mom, so I had my daughter around 18. So I went back to college in my 20s, and I did very well. I ended up getting into Wellesley College from Bristol Community College. So I was exposed to a lot of poetry. I was exposed to a lot of interesting poets. I learned a lot from some great professors, and I found myself being more, I don't want to say music isn't intellectual, but I found myself more interested in intellectual stuff, and so it kind of almost made it was like a seed in my brain, you know, it planted there, and I didn't do poetry yet.
Were you writing songs?
I was writing songs with my album. I did write some music, but I guess I know I should think of it as writing, you know, it's almost like poetry.
Yeah, well, yeah, lyrics and poetry have always been related.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because this is a lot of people would perceive it as a drastic switch from music to visual arts. And so how do you feel about how they relate to each other, I guess is what I'm getting at.
And to me, they are just tools to express yourself. If you just try to work on the actual method. So I feel like whether it's music, I trained myself to sing. So I just trained myself to start painting. With the poetry, I have a writing coach now because I do feel like, you know, there are things you need to know with writing poetry. Like you can't just, you know, you need to understand stanzas and certain things. So
you got very specific about the different kinds of poetry and how there are certain rules and how people notice if you don't follow those rules, that kind of thing.
Yes.
We can probably introduce your artwork with the portraits back here, if you want to talk a little bit about those.
Sure. So actually, these paintings were a few years ago. This is actually me trying to do a master copy. This one's obviously a master copy.
Right, from the girl with the pearl earring.
Yes, Vermeer. And this was a part of my process of trying to learn from the masters.
Yes.
Because when I did this painting, I wasn't ready to start expressing myself because I was like, okay, I need to learn from the masters and try to, you know, get this classical, you know, I need to get it down.
Yeah.
This was Angela. This was from a workshop I had taken from a great artist, and I did that live from a live model. I was kind of happy about that. There wasn't much time to do it.
No, that's.
But I think these kind of represent me trying to master the skill of painting. Now I feel like I'm at a point where I can play because this was maybe like 5 or 7 years ago. So now I'm starting to play and, you know, do what I call like impressionism or just representational, but mixed with impressionism, because I feel, I find that's how I express myself. With this, like when I was doing this was a great way to show people, oh look, I can paint. But at the same time, it's like this is someone else's experience. This is someone else's.
And then there's a tradition of someone copying a master. So it's a beginning step to something else, though.
Yeah.
Now, before we go too much further, we wanted to talk about ekphrastic
poetry. Yes. It's a tough one.
We finally got the word, and we looked it up, and you wanted to share a poem with us.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do that.
Okay. This is actually was inspired by one of the master paintings I did of Wilfred Jenkins, who was an obscure artist. I like the obscure artists.
Yeah.
And William Blake.
Yeah.
So this is an ode to William Blake and Wilfred Jenkins. I hear you, I feel you. Obscurity has such a bitter taste. Visions, I don't see them, William. Wilfred, there are no stained glass windows in my neighborhood. Beauty is becoming harder to find in buildings and people. All that is left to look at is nature, and one can only paint water so many times. Your industrial revolution may be to thank, William. There are only so many shades of a boat, but history? Ah, yes, your memories inspire. But I wonder, William, I have followed my imagination and it has led me to confusion. Was there an answer I was to find there? You tried to separate man from nature. You are now immersed in nature, in the grass and insects. You are now one. The tree stands taller, grander through hundreds of years while you rot in the ground. Do the trees speak of the visions they have seen? Wilfred, there is no yellow more beautiful than the golden light through painted sand. Ultraviolet, artificial, colored lasers can't touch the warm light of fire. The balance of man and nature in unison is beauty. I can find it in your dimly lit windows, Wilfred, and poems of the seasons, William. Ah, yes, your memories inspire. They bring me out of my coffin and into yours.
Very good.
Thank you.
Now we need to show some artwork
Yes.
because we're rapidly running out of time.
So this is, let's see, this way right here. Okay.
Yep, right there.
So this is actually a master copy I did of a Wilfred Jenkins painting. He wasn't well known, but now he's becoming well known. He was known for his nocturnal scenes. I was inspired to write because of the way that he painted in a Victorian way during a time where the Industrial Revolution was starting to kind of pick up, and I feel like he captured the perfect time where
There's a transition time.
yeah, when it wasn't too industrialized, but you could still appreciate the beauty of nature, if that makes any sense.
No,
I'm trying to say that very
very moody piece.
And I actually, because there aren't any buildings with stained glass around anymore, I took a painting, I looked at an old abandoned building online, and I tried to make my own
Interpretation.
interpretation, and I tried to make it almost like a Wilfred Jenkins painting. It was very tough because I had to imagine and.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So.
Now, let's keep moving.
Okay. And recently, I did this painting of watercolor called The Flume. There really isn't anything about this painting except I really liked how beautiful the flume is at, it's in Heritage Gardens.
So, did you initially start that as a plein air, or
No,
okay,
this one was just,
from a photograph?
yeah, from a photograph.
Okay. You have some more portraits.
Let me see, oh yes, let me find them.
Got to show the one of your friend and,
Oh, yes.
and your daughter.
This is this one actually inspired me to do another poem. This is watercolor. I call this She Wants to Play the Charango.
Yes, and there's a whole story about your friend going to Mexico and
Yes.
learning a stringed instrument just
Yes.
on kind of a whim.
Yes, and we could not find her. We didn't know she went.
You wanted that. You wanted that to be kind of reflected in the painting and the photograph.
Yes, she's a very interesting person, and tried to make it just
Absolutely.
as interesting.
No, you're very much in the here and now, but you're also kind of paying homage to the past. Like,
Yes.
for instance, this really, I was very intrigued by this painting of that
Liana.
is your daughter. Yes.
Yes, I actually called her another name. In this painting, I used her as a model, as many artists do with their daughters.
Of course.
And I wanted to make it look almost Victorian because I really like the beauty of that age. You know, you can see a theme here with me. And I call this Scarlet, and it is my daughter, Liana. But
Yep.
I tried to make it look old, and she even was wearing a costume in the painting
Sure.
to help.
I very much liked how you rendered the dress in that.
Thank you very much.
Well, now I must say that we have reached the end of our time here, and I wanted to thank you so much. I know you were nervous to start, but we were good. And
Thank you for
so
having
much.
me. Thank you for having
Absolutely.
me.
So we're here with our next guest, and this is Jackson Kneath. And I've only known Jackson a brief time, and we're kind of catching up with things. We had a conversation a few months ago about EC Comics and pre-code horror and all things like that. And Jackson is a recent graduate of RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad that we were able to do this. So tell us a little bit about how things got started with you and what your influences are and good stuff like that.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I drew all the time. Pentel markers was my thing. all the multicolor pens. I would spend a lot of time drawing my comic books, drawing all the characters out of them, and eventually I started taking classes with Don Permiano in Warren at Don's Art Shop.
That's Warren, Rhode Island, because you're a Rhode Island man.
Yep, I grew up in Bristol, born in Providence.
Yep.
And I've lived here my whole life.
Yep.
Those classes were really formative for me. I was drawing and painting, and eventually I would take classes at RISD and eventually attend the school.
Were you a star in high school?
I was not. I was not a star. I don't know what I would classify myself as, but...
Well, you know, everybody gets partitioned into a clique here and there. But you were so inspired that you were able to go to, and you got into and were able to complete your courses at RISD. Now, we were also talking about music and your influences there and how you're a musician as well, right?
Yeah, I've been in bands, in punk bands, and done a lot of noise music over the years, ever since I was a teenager pretty much.
Yep.
And because I exist in this intersection between art and punk and comics, zines were really important to me, collecting them and trading them. And I would make my own comics. One of them was called Funny Farm, I made in high school, and I actually have a tattoo of a page from Funny Farm, really dense drawing. Yeah, so that's something I was working on in high school, and then I'm working on one right now called Fields of Fire, which is a little bit more about death.
Now, is this a solo project, or do you invite other people to participate?
For the comics, it's mostly just me.
Okay.
I find it easier to just cruise through pages.
Do you do sequential storytelling?
Kind of, yeah. It's all a little abstract. It's kind of hard to follow, but...
So do you do a series of splash pages, like single page drawings, or you break stuff up, or?
Funny Farm was all single page, and then Fields of Fire is more sequential with cells. And
now, is there a theme behind Fields of Fire?
Yeah, it follows
besides death.
Yeah. It follows this cloaked figure who arrives at different creatures' time of death and teaches them about what's to come next. I actually have a painting that's inspired by one of the stills from...
Do you have that here?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Right
you know, I get constant criticism that we don't spend enough time showing artwork, so let's get the show on the road here.
So this painting is a painting that's a study from a cell of this comic. It's the figure, the cloaked figure riding a horse backwards.
So when you say cell, that's like an animation reference.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so.
It's all a little animated to me, I guess.
Well, it's animated in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the beauty of doing something like this is that you can direct a $1 billion movie, but all it takes is your hand and your brain.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so let's bring this down and then continue to talk while you show more artwork.
Yeah. I actually have this large-scale drawing with me here that also has this cloaked figure. You can see he's in the front with the orange cloak.
Right.
And I like to...
Now, is this a painting or is this a print?
This is actually Pentel markers.
Oh, this is, okay, wow, all right.
I try to figure out ways that I can sort of imitate printing processes found in comic books through drawing and painting and stuff.
Yeah, well, this almost looks like a screen print, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of screen prints, I actually have some with me.
Yep, because you did that too, right?
Yeah, I learned screen printing at ACE 220 Youth when I was a teenager. With me here, I have one of my screen prints from a Halloween series, Dracula.
Oh, right. Okay. Because that, you know, obviously looks like an old-timey advertisement for a mask.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to draw from comic books, and then I'll just keep drawing from the drawing of the comic book.
And
over
morphing
and
it and
Absolutely.
changing it. Now,
Yeah.
do you have any favorite artists that you are inspired by?
Absolutely Jack Kirby
Jack Kirby.
for comic
yeah.
artists. Christopher Forgus, who was a underground comic
Okay.
artist. I actually got one of his comics from your shop.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, over the summer, last summer.
Okay.
And also Gary Panter. He's
Oh, yeah, I'm
huge-
very familiar with him. A lot of people remember him because he designed the sets for Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah.
But he also did Jimbo and a whole bunch of,
Jimbo.
I guess they called them above ground or underground stuff.
Yeah.
He's like the second generation. Hold up your Wolfman.
Oh, this is a wolf creature.
Again, very much like you'd see in the back of a comic book for an old timey Halloween mask. You know, you send us $1.99 and we'll send you this fabulous mask, and it would just be a piece of paper you cut the eyes out of,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Get your own nuclear submarine. Or your woodsy cabin. And all right.
And I have one more of these screen prints. These were editions of 20. This is a Frankenstein, similar, kind of looks like a mask.
Uh-huh.
I do a lot of collecting of a lot of things, records, tapes, comic books, toys. So I think amassing all of these objects plays a big part into how I draw and the subject matter.
Well, you use them as a touchstone and an inspiration, right?
Absolutely.
And, you know, it kind of feeds into your consciousness. What are your dreams like?
My dreams. My dreams are pretty intense, and they usually say something about what's about to happen. I always feel
Oh,
like
you have
my-
precognitive dreams?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, they. It can be helpful sometimes when I don't know what's coming next.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, you're a recent graduate from art school. Do you have any immediate plans?
For now, I'm working at a restaurant and I'm painting. Trying to figure out what's next. I'm not exactly sure,
Mm-hmm.
but I have this. I live on the Cranston line in Providence,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a studio space in my basement. It's an octagon, wooden room. It looks like it used to be a wood shop at one point, and I've just been painting down there, and the lighting is really strange. There's these giant neon lights. And
Neon, like colored neon?
no, they're just like super fluorescent, but it makes colors look really intense.
Mm.
You know, like paintings like this. It breeds a new ground for the kinds of colors that I'm mixing and all that. I feel like it plays a big role.
Now, do you ever draw or paint from life, or are you inspired by just stuff that comes out of your mind?
I definitely draw and paint from life, more in sketchbooks and notebooks and stuff, and then like I said earlier, I'll keep drawing those drawings so they mutate into something new.
Yeah.
Like this, for example, which is actually taken from a dream sequence, which was the dual-headed deer in the foreground of this painting, was something that I had encountered in a dream and just kept painting until it was abstract shapes.
Now, is there a theme behind this piece? And, because it looks like it's kind of evolved from almost like a mural on the facade of a building, and it appears that things are coming to life and coming out of it. And I think that a lot of people would say that it's disconcerting because of the vacuum you have at the bottom.
Yeah.
So, you want to talk about some of the characters in there, or?
Yeah. I think at first, like the theme definitely has to do with accumulation and then the lack thereof, or the deterioration of that accumulation, with like the vacuum that you say on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then the characters are all different iterations of toys, or characters from dreams, or I spent a lot of time in the woods hiking, and encountering deer face to face can be pretty intense. And
Yeah,
I think this
absolutely.
painting is kind of talking about that experience.
But you're also bringing wildlife into a kind of an urban environment.
Yeah.
And well, even during the recent pandemic, there are all sorts of news stories about people encountering live animals on urban streets. Like there was a proliferation of coyotes, for instance, or deers coming into city street. Now, that gives it a kind of a post-apocalyptic feeling, and I was wondering if you were going for that too.
Absolutely. Actually, the comic that I was talking about earlier that I had done in high school, Funny Farm, was inspired by Chernobyl and everything that happened there, where the nuclear reactors blew, and it had a serious effect on the wildlife. And Funny Farm followed all of the animals through the process of mutation.
Was it set in Chernobyl or?
No, it was set in Funny Farm, which is like a fictitious place.
Okay, was Funny Farm in America somewhere?
I didn't get that detailed where it actually was.
You have a hooded figure in that one too.
Oh yeah,
That's your Grim Reaper.
yeah. He's pretty present through a lot of my work, especially of recently. I've kind of just continually painted him, and at first he had a skull, but over time he doesn't really have a skull. It's just a void under his cloak.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been a representation of manifestation of death since like the early, I mean, before the Middle Ages, and it was very prevalent in the art of the Middle Ages. Now you have some kind of lizard thing happening in the swan too,
Yeah,
which is, that almost has mythological connotations. I mean, it's definitely multi-layered. You have what look like maybe Asian businessmen in the middle there, because the more you look, the more you're going to see in there.
yeah,
And there's yet another deer, and that deer almost looks like a 20,000-year-old cave painting.
yeah, yeah. I try to talk a lot about history from a lot of different points through the work, and I think living in Providence, I spent a lot of time around a lot of really old things, and the city can feel haunted pretty often.
So I'm assuming you read some H.P. Lovecraft in your time?
I have,
Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
yeah.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for making your way over here today and sharing all this with us. And congratulations on your recent graduation.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks a lot. And that brings us to the end of another episode of Art Matters, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for showing up.